Hello, I'm Gary McKenzie, Vice President of Operations for Logistic, and I'm sitting here with one of our co-founders, Jared Fisher, to talk about a modern-day oligopoly, FedEx and UPS.
Let's do it, Gary.
All right, so obviously the first question is what is an oligopoly? And then I guess the tangential to that is what makes FedEx and UPS one?
Sure, so the short answer, an oligopoly is essentially a state of limited competition in which you have a few sellers or suppliers controlling essentially a market. So whether we want to call it an oligopoly or a duopoly, if we look at the small parcel industry here domestically, it's over $100 billion a year, and it is primarily controlled by UPS and FedEx. I would say, you know, the statistics are somewhere above 80% of the market being controlled by those two. Just for example, UPS's revenue 2019 was around $71 billion, and that's globally. And then for FedEx, it was approximately $65 billion globally. On a global scale, there are obviously some additional players like DHL, Deutsche Post, YEC. So there's other options on a global scale, but if we're just looking at the domestic market and talking about the domestic market, it is really controlled by UPS and FedEx. Make no mistake. We know there are other options here in the US, but if your business is predicated on your ability to ship with UPS and FedEx, that is a very important vendor relationship. And for a lot of companies, they've had perhaps a bad experience with one or the other, so in their minds, there may only be one option to service their business needs as it relates to shipping packages.
Obviously, the two carriers got there somehow to this oligopoly state. So let's just take them one at a time. Do they control the same market, or is it a different kind of market that each of the two control? Or, you know, let's take UPS for example. Where are they a dominant player?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, today they both offer air and ground services, but it wasn't always that way, right? UPS has been around for a long time, quite a bit longer than FedEx, and their strength was primarily ground delivery, right? So they built their network around being able to deliver packages within several days, right? And then FedEx entered the market in the 70s, and as you know, their primary focus was the hub and spoke model for air deliveries, right? And then, yeah, over the years, both carriers have addressed their client needs to be able to, you know, in UPS's case, be reliable for delivering air shipments, and in FedEx's case, being reliable for ground package delivery. FedEx did that through an acquisition of a provider called RPS back in, I think it was in the 90s. And yeah, there's some differences in terms of UPS being union, for example, FedEx not. But at the end of the day, you know, they are both airlines. They are both behemoths of companies, of organizations. And at this point, yeah, they both have very strong ground air delivery networks, and both can get a package from here to anywhere else in the country with precision and reliability.
So they're kind of interchangeable now based on their own desire to grow into each other's space, at least in the early days. So, but now pretty much either choice is a good one.
You know, based on where you as a shipper may be located, UPS may be stronger in being able to offer a later pickup, for example, or FedEx, vice versa. It just kind of depends. But yeah, I mean, if we're looking at averages, you know, both carriers are extremely reliable, whether I'm shipping a ground or an air package, in getting that package where it needs to be on time.
Well, fair enough. So These guys basically grew into each other's market for obvious reasons. They saw revenue there, they did that. There's been other competition along the way, and that competition really doesn't exist now except for maybe the Postal Service, which is, I guess, a third option. So how significant is that threat?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. So a lot of us remember when Airborne Express was around, which was acquired by DHL. DHL, had the backing of Deutsche Post, and they made a push to compete with UPS and FedEx here domestically. Make no mistake. I mean, what they do day in and day out is mind-blowing. Being able to get a package from here across the country with precision and reliability. And DHL just wasn't able to make it work. It's very difficult to compete with UPS and FedEx at the scale that or at the level that they compete on. So yeah, DHL is obviously not a player here domestically anymore, meaning you can't ship a package from here to New York via DHL, but yes, there are other options. You do have the USPS, which has become more of a threat, despite some of the financial struggles and troubles that we've seen there. We have obviously Amazon in the game now, with them utilizing couriers, local, for local deliveries. We have regional carriers at this point. So all throughout the US, there are regional carriers. And what regional carriers do is focus on delivering packages to a specific geographic region. For example, the West Coast, right? So if we look at, 6-8 states in the West Coast, there are regional carriers that only service those states. And so, yes, there are other options. Make no mistake, UPS compete with one another as well as compete with the regionals. But in the same regard, UPS and FedEx still really do control the market. Let me give you an example. Come the end of the year, every year, like clockwork, are the carrier price increases. And what happens is one carrier announces their price increase and the other carrier matches that price increase. So, they don't necessarily have to be sitting at the table together having a conversation about what their price increase is going to be. They just wait. They basically mirror what the other one does. So, we've seen over the past couple of years, the carriers, one of the carriers will roll out a type of accessorial fee in the mid-year. Guess what typically happens? A couple days later, the other carrier matches whatever fee the other carrier just rolled out. So they very much do control the market, and I would say there is an unsaid working together to continue to drive the price up for me as a consumer. One of the problems with duopolies or oligopolies is that as a consumer, when there's less competition, I end up paying more, right? When we see more competition in any market, in any industry, that levels the playing field and lowers the price for the consumer. So yeah, what we've seen over the years is UPS and FedEx continue to raise their rates every year. At the end of the day, if you want to continue shipping with them, there's really not a whole lot you can do aside from some of the obvious things like making sure your contract is optimized, making sure that you are auditing your invoices so that they're not keeping money that you are entitled to through refund credits. There's things you can do like looking at some of those regional carriers, taking advantage of regional carriers and or the USPS where it makes sense to. Now keep in mind, if you're taking volume away from UPS or FedEx, that can influence your UPS and FedEx pricing in a negative way, but there are ways to mitigate that through restructuring your carrier agreement to give you the ability to move certain types of shipments and some of your volume to other carriers.
And other carriers would be like the post office. But interestingly, you said that UPS and FedEx control the market, and they can control it without necessarily getting 100% of the volume, because their pricing influences all other pricing. So whatever they decide they're going to do, other, I guess, less expensive carriers may choose that path. However, it's still going to be relatively close to what UPS and FedEx are doing. Otherwise, I guess they would feel they were leaving money on the table.
Absolutely.
A big question that I've always had anyway is, do FedEx and UPS influence the government regulations that actually control sort of the environment that they're working in?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It would be foolish to think that they did not, as big as they are. Yes, they have a tremendous amount of lobbying power with the government. They have their own airlines. They each have tens and tens and tens of thousands of employees. So yeah, they're as I mentioned earlier, behemoths. Their top line revenue is astronomical, and absolutely they have influence with the government and state officials, being that both companies have operational facilities located throughout the United States.
All right, so an oligopoly for sure. But what can we do about it? I mean, what are they, as a shipper, what are our options,
Yeah, some people feel like, or some shippers feel like, oh man, there's not much that I can do about it. And I would say that's definitely not the case. Even if you are to just continue using UPS and FedEx, although they are raising rates every year, those contracts are negotiable. Every service type and every accessorial fee within an agreement is negotiable. So making sure you're staying on top of changes in the marketplace, how the carriers are applying certain discounts and accessorials is where somebody like Logistic comes into play. Obviously, we have a very good pulse on what is happening in the marketplace. So that would be the first. The second, as I mentioned earlier, was really gaining an understanding of other options like the regional carriers. Throughout the United States, there are options based on where you're shipping to and shipping from. And so, for example, if I have a high concentration if I'm located on the West Coast and I have a high concentration of shipments staying within the Western geographic region, I don't necessarily need to use UPS or FedEx to move those shipments. I can use a regional carrier like OnTrack, for example. And so understanding how the regionals can benefit, or how a shipper can use the regionals and the different regional carriers that are available throughout the United States, using couriers. I mean, it all really depends on your package characteristics, where you're shipping to, where you're shipping from, where the concentrations of your clients are located geographically, and then leveraging the other option, which is USPS when you can. Whereas, I remember 10 years ago, the thought of using USPS was not attractive nor appealing. And in today's market, we're seeing many more shippers and businesses more comfortable with utilizing the USPS when and where they can.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Jared, for the insight, and thank you for watching. For more information on how you can join the thousands of businesses currently using Logistic to send cost packing, please visit our website, www.logistic.com.